You already know what detachment is supposed to mean. Let go, release the outcome, stop obsessing. And yet here you are, still catching yourself checking, still wondering why, after months of practice, the manifestation is out there instead of here. This video is not going to tell you to try harder to detach. That framing is the problem. Neville Goddard never taught detachment as something you apply to your desire. He taught it as something that naturally happens when your assumption is complete. There is a specific reason most practitioners never reach that point. Not because they lack discipline, but because they are applying effort at the wrong layer of consciousness. By the end of this, you will know exactly where your state is leaking between sessions. Four mistakes. One of them looks completely correct from the outside. The first mistake is treating detachment as an emotion to perform. Scroll through any LOA content and you will find the same instruction repackaged in different words. Release the attachment, stop caring whether it comes. This is not Neville. I want to be specific about that. The detachment doctrine floating around the modern manifestation space is a misreading and a consequential one. Neville did not ask you to go emotionally neutral about your desire. He asked you to live in the end so completely that anxious wanting has nowhere to stand. These are not variations on the same idea, they are opposite operations. When you force yourself to feel neutral about something you deeply want, you are not practicing assumption, you are practicing suppression. The desire is still active underneath, and the subconscious registers exactly what is being covered up. This is the part of Neville's work most people read straight past. They see detachment in modern commentary and assume Neville meant emotional coolness. He didn't. He was pointing at something structural. Neville stated this in The Power of Awareness, published in 1952. The state you actually inhabit is what the law reflects back, not the state you perform during your session. The state that runs as the background of your life. True detachment is not a technique layered on top of your practice. It is the natural result of a fully formed assumption. You do not detach from desire, you detach from the gap. And if you are still having to remind yourself to let go, the assumption is not yet real. There is a pattern I have watched repeat with student after student. Someone reaches a genuine felt state of the wish fulfilled during their SAT session. The session ends. Within minutes of opening their eyes, they run a quiet internal audit. Was that session good enough? Will it work this time? That audit is the assumption collapsing in real time. But there is something I have not told you yet about the specific moment when that collapse actually begins. Not when the person notices it, when it starts. The timing is not where you would expect. I will show you that exact moment in a few minutes, because identifying it changes the entire equation. The second mistake is monitoring for evidence. A person spends 1 hour in SATs reaching a genuine feeling of the wish fulfilled. They fall asleep in that state. And then, across the other 23 hours of the day, they do something that quietly cancels everything they built. They look for proof. They check for a message that hasn't arrived. They analyze behavior for signs of movement. Every check is a declaration that the outcome is not yet real. Every scan re-anchors them in the old state. The subconscious reflects what is being lived as background feeling, not what was felt during the dedicated hour. Neville addressed this in his Los Angeles teaching period. Anxiety is proof you are living in the problem. Faith is proof you have moved to the solution. They cannot coexist because they occupy different states of consciousness. Evidence checking is the behavior of someone who has not crossed the gap yet. This is where the free source code diagnostic in the description was designed to help. It shows you which specific hours in your day the assumption is holding, and which hours it is leaking. The leak is almost never during the practice session itself. If you want to see exactly where your state breaks down between sessions, the link is in the description. The third mistake is imagining the bridge instead of the end. The word visualize has been mistranslated into imagine the sequence of events. People imagine the conversation that reconciles the relationship. They imagine the chain of events that delivers the thing. This keeps them in the middle of the story permanently, never at the resolution. Now, here is what most teachers leave out. There is a specific detail about bridge imagination that Neville's actual recordings make plain. I will show you that detail now. Neville's clearest illustration comes from his own life in 1943. Stationed at Camp Polk in Louisiana, drafted at 38, he wanted an honorable discharge to return to his New York apartment. He did not try to identify which officer might help. He did not research which regulation permitted early release. He fell asleep each night, assuming he was already in his New York apartment, feeling the specific sensory reality of already being there. After approximately 9 days, the Army granted him an honorable discharge under Regulation 615-360, paragraph 5. He did not imagine the discharge paperwork. He did not imagine the conversation with his commanding officer. He imagined the end, only the end. The bridge appeared on its own. Here is the specific detail left out of most retellings. Bridge imagination actively undermines the assumption. Every time you imagine a specific bridge, you send the subconscious a signal that says, I do not yet know how this arrives. That signal is the gap, restated. In his teachings from 1961, Neville stated this plainly. The way to fulfill a desire is not your concern. Your job is to occupy the state where the desire is already real. Bridge imagination is not just unnecessary, it is counterproductive. The bridge keeps the desire at arm's length. The end places you inside the reality of it. There is still one final piece I have not addressed, and it is the one that separates the practitioners who see results in weeks from those still working the same technique a year later. I will get to it now because it is where all four mistakes converge. The fourth mistake is the most insidious because it looks exactly like doing the technique correctly. There is a type of practitioner who does sets every night with real discipline. They reach a genuine feeling of the wish fulfilled. They fall asleep in the state. 3 months in, nothing substantial has shifted. The problem is not commitment level. The problem is structural. Here is what I keep watching happen. The session is clean. The assumption is genuine in those 30 minutes. But the moment the session ends, the practitioner quietly steps back into their old identity. Not dramatically, just quietly. They go back to the life that does not yet have the thing they want. They speak from the old baseline. They respond from the old baseline. The assumption was a nightly event, not a daily state. This is where the specific collapse moment I mentioned earlier becomes clear. The collapse does not begin when you open your eyes. It begins the moment the session ends and you resume your habitual identity without any structure to hold the new one. That transition from practiced assumption back to background identity, repeated every single day. Remember the first mistake, treating detachment as an emotion to perform. This is where it compounds. The practitioner finishes their session, tries to let go, and in the same motion returns to the habitual identity that still does not include the thing. Both happen simultaneously. Nothing here requires talent or exceptional willpower. What it requires is attention to the hours you have been treating as neutral. Those hours are not neutral. They are where the subconscious settles into what it accepts as your actual normal. Neville's central teaching in Feeling is the Secret is clear on this. The subconscious does not care what you did during your meditation session. It knows what you feel as true when you are not thinking about it. That background feeling in your ordinary moments is the real prayer, not the dedicated hour, the other hours. The deeper pattern connecting all four mistakes is this. The practitioner is treating manifestation as a technique to perform, rather than a state to inhabit. The manifestation finishes itself when there is nothing left in you that needs finishing. The 1 hour of practice is the seed. The 23 hours between sessions are the soil. If the soil still carries the old state, the seed cannot take root. Here is what this all comes down to. The reason your detachment efforts have not worked is not that you are too attached. It is that you have been trying to detach from a desire rather than detach from a gap. Neville did not ask you to care less. He asked you to settle so deeply into the end that the gap no longer exists. When the assumption is real, the monitoring stops by itself. Not because you fought it down, but because there is nothing left to monitor. Seeing this is the first half of the work. The second half is the part almost nobody addresses. Understanding that your assumption needs to hold across your full day is not the same as knowing how to actually hold it. Knowing the principle is easy, installing it into the hours you are not actively practicing is the specific work. It requires a concrete diagnostic of where the state breaks and a protocol for rebuilding it at the exact hours it matters. Not inspiration, not willpower, structure. To maintain the state between sessions, the state where detachment is natural rather than forced, start with the source code diagnostic. It maps where your assumption is holding and where it is collapsing during the hours you are not in practice. It pinpoints the specific leak. It is free and the link is in the description below. Tonight, before your SAT session, take 60 seconds to notice what you feel as your background condition right now. Before you set up the assumption, before you settle into the state, that is the soil. The session is the seed. Both matter. In his teachings from the 1950s, Neville said, imagining creates reality. Not practicing, not visualizing, imagining as in what you already hold as real inside yourself. That is the work. See you in the next one.